Wednesday, March 14th, afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Saltzman?
Here.
Udaley?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. Why don't you go ahead and read the statement, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer will preserve order and decorum during the City Council meetings so that everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in the council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to speak briefly on any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you. So we're here today to hear public testimony on the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the MAP Refinement Project. On April 4th, the council will deliberate and vote on amendments that were the subject of the public hearing, which is today on March 14th. Carla, could you please read the item?
Item 257, amend the 2035 Comprehensive Plan map and amend the official city zoning map to carry out Portland's 2035 Comprehensive Plan.
So at this point, I'll invite Erik Angstrom, Marty Singleton, and other BPS staff to come up and introduce our meeting today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler. My name is Erik Angstrom. I manage the Comprehensive Planning Group at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And with me here is Marty Singleton. She is with our District Liaison Program and was the project manager for this effort that we're bringing you today. Before she goes into more details about the project, I'd like to just briefly put some context on why we're here and what this is. 3 of you participated in the comprehensive plan adoption in 2016, and 2 of you are new since then, so a brief refresher on that. In June of 2016, you adopted the new comprehensive plan, and that was done under the state mandated periodic review process, which is a state requirement that we periodically refresh and update our growth management plans. This was the largest update since 1980, and it was a multi-year effort that culminated in the 2016 votes. In 2016, you both adopted the new plan as well as adopted a package of implementing code amendments to the zoning code and maps to carry it out. The plan also includes projects, the citywide infrastructure plan, as well as a plan map and a policy document. This month, we're bringing you 3 different projects to help ensure a smooth transition to the new comprehensive plan. And you may recall that you voted in the fall for a short delay in the implementation of the new plan until May of this year. And that has allowed us some time to both sort out appeals at the state level that are going on, as well as deal with loose ends to clean up and ensure a smooth implementation. And so the 3 packages coming to you this month are all in the spirit of cleaning up loose ends that affect the implementation of the new comprehensive plan. And there are 3 different packages. In general, they are fairly technical and have pretty minor implications, but a few of them do have some policy implications and deserve some discussion. But it's a fairly thick package, we realize, with a lot of small details. So as we go, don't hesitate to ask questions. It's a pretty confusing bundle, and we acknowledge that because it's pulling together a lot of different unrelated pieces into one package. The first thing that you're hearing about, which is the subject of today's hearing, is cleanup of the maps, the zoning map or the comprehensive plan map. And so there's a number of sites that Marty will be discussing that we've bundled together as a project to refine the map. Next week, you'll be hearing about the zoning code refinement bundle, as well as the final package to complete the new transportation system plan. And under Oregon state land use law, transportation planning and land use planning are kind of tied at the hip. And so the city's new transportation system plan has been traveling along with the project to update the comprehensive plan. And that final step is happening next week. And that's part of our effort to ensure that this all goes smoothly when we turn on the new comprehensive plan on May 24th. Because of that fixed date that we've adopted, we want to ensure that there's a smooth process of considering these refinements, and the final vote, the second reading final vote of these three things will all occur on May 24th so that they occur with the adoption of the new comprehensive plan. And since you're amending the new plan, that final vote has to occur after the plan is actually in effect, which will be the case on the afternoon of the 24th.
So the state has approved our comprehensive plan?
There's an appeal still pending, and actually there's a hearing tomorrow in Salem that will be making our final arguments. We're optimistic that will go well and that we will have state acknowledgement by May 24th. And if there's any complications to that, we'll come back and brief you on that. Okay. Final thing to mention is that this is not the Central City Plan. I know you've been dealing with that a lot in the last few months, and so this is about the citywide comprehensive plan, and so most of the mapping questions we're dealing with today are outside the Central City.
Great.
Marty.
Thank you. My name is Marty Stockton, as Erik mentioned, and I served as a project manager on this project, and I'm also part of the district liaison program of district planners. I serve Southeast Portland. That is my district. Along with the project team, we had 3 other of my teammates. So Nan Stark, who is the district liaison for North and Northeast Portland, Joan Frederickson, who's the district liaison for West, and Leslie Lum, who is the district liaison for East Portland. So that's what made up the project team for this project. So I wanted to refresh our city council members that were here at the time of adoption in June and December of 2016, but then also bring our new members kind of on the same page. The origin of the map refinement project was from the ordinance that was adopted along with the implementation package in December of 2016. And there was what we call Exhibit O, which was a short list of about 13 sites that council was interested in. They had received testimony on, but at that time they could not make an action on this short list of sites. And so this Exhibit O was a direction by City Council for our Bureau to do either an evaluation or a reevaluation of these sites in a legislative process. And so again, that is the origin of this particular project. And so this is also one of 4 categories that of map changes that we're including in the map refinement project. The other 3 categories are the reconciliation of land use and zoning maps that have been occurring at the Bureau of Development Services. So when we have the effective date of the new comprehensive plan map and zoning map on May 24th, that essentially will override anything that has gone before Bureau of Development Services in this interim time. So we are tracking those very closely and are coordinating with Bureau of Development Services staff to make sure that we bring those in. And so that is, again, category number 2 of packaged map changes.
So that means that if an applicant has gone through a quasi-judicial zone change, they've got an approval, but it's different from what we approved in the comprehensive plan map, then we change the comprehensive plan map.
So exactly, we need to pull those in. So that's the purpose of category number 2.
And
exactly.
in some cases, the zoning categories have themselves changed, so we need to transfer that what they got to the equivalent in the new plan.
So if anything went to a commercial zone, so neighborhood commercial 1 or CN1, we need to make sure it's part of the new commercial mixed zones, so CM1 in that case.
Great, thank you.
So the third item or category is changes to avoid the creation of new non-conforming development. So there are a number of areas citywide that we are tracking where there has been very recent development activity, for example, along Sandy Boulevard or in the Vancouver-Williams corridor or along the Northwest Moreland area. There were some areas that there were some what we call down zoning. So that means that the development capacity or the height or floor area ratio at the time of adoption was reduced in the comprehensive plan and zoning maps, but development has since occurred. And so again, there's a bit of a reconciliation so we don't create new non-conforming development. And then the final fourth category is a package of technical and policy-related map changes. These are not very exciting, but they definitely include a lot of split zoned sites, cleanup of our overlays, finding new non-conforming commercial sites, and a lot of bureau-coordinated map changes. So we've been working with Bureau of Environmental Services, the Housing Bureau, and Portland Parks and Rec to incorporate some, recent acquisitions that those bureaus have made. And then also in this group, there is a concerted effort to coordinate with our affordable housing providers. I have mentioned the Portland Housing Bureau, but that also includes Home Forward, Reach CDC, Save-In CDC, PCRI, Rose CDC, and others. And so where appropriate, we are coordinating with them on some select map changes. So I wanted to just show you kind of a slide of everything. And so this is the citywide map and then the colors of the map changes. And you will see that there are 177 map change sites for a total of 184.5 acres, which equals 0.19% of our land use. And so I just wanted to kind of give you a scale of what's included in this project. Again, it's 0.19 of the land area is included in a map change in this project. This is maybe a little easier to see, and so this is exactly the same map, but we call this a scatter map, and so you can see kind of the sites pop out a bit. They are color-coded, so again, the 4 categories that I just walked through, the blue are that were included in the December 2016 Council Directive. The green on the map are where there is a reconciliation with the quasi-judicial map changes that Bureau of Development Services has been implementing. The red on the map is, again, where we want to avoid new non-conforming development. And then the yellow, which is really the bulk of what's included in the project, is other technical and policy-related map changes. And I think this slide's important. Most people actually don't know that we have a 2-map system in the city of Portland. We have the comprehensive plan map and then the zoning map. And so we are actually proposing changes on both maps within this project. And so on the comprehensive plan map, there are the land use designations, so whether a property is commercial or residential or open space, and as well as the center boundaries. And that was a new inclusion that was adopted in the June 2016 comprehensive plan map. So for example, the Hollywood Town Center or Lentz Town Center, there's actual boundaries to those geographies. The zoning map has your base zones, and so whether you have an R5 zone or a new commercial mixed-use 1 zone, you have your overlay zones, your plan districts, and your trails.
And just briefly, that the distinction between the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map is that the comprehensive plan map gives you the long-range vision and the generalized idea of the future. The zoning map is what you can get a permit to do today.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. I wanted to include this slide because on the first, or going back, overlay zones, a bulk of what is proposed as far as overlay zone changes has to do with the removal of the buffer overlay zone. So in the December 2016 adoption of the zoning map, there was the removal of the buffer overlay zone on all commercial zoning that had a mapped buffer overlay. And so if you look at this map and see the red on the map, that has already been adopted as a removal on the buffer overlay. The blue on the map is where there is a current proposal before you, which is now the removal of the buffer overlay zone on the employment and industrial lands.
So I'm not sure I recall what a buffer overlay zone is.
Sure, no, that's a really good point. The buffer overlay zone is it is mapped on sites where you have, in this case, an employment zone that abuts against a residential zone. And there's oftentimes different widths at that, how the buffer overlay zone is mapped. But in that overlay, it relates to a code section, the buffer overlay code chapter, which has I would say a higher level of setback requirements, landscape requirements, whether or not vehicle access is allowed within that overlay. And also it talks about exterior work activities or storage in that area. We have been working, this is actually tied to the Code Reconciliation Project, which is the project that Eric mentioned that will come before you next week, next Wednesday. But in this project, similar to what was done in the zoning code in December of 2016, where a lot of those good standards, whether it was for setbacks, landscaping, or exterior work activities, instead of having that live in the overlay zone, it was actually moved into the base zone. And so that's what happened during the mixed-use zones project. Similarly, we're proposing to do the same thing. So it's a little bit of a structural, where we're taking those standards that live currently in the overlay zone, and we're moving them into the employment and industrial zones in the Code Reconciliation Project that you'll listen to next week.
One of the reasons for doing that is that the buffer overlay approach requires us to map it and acknowledge all those instances where those two zones intersect. Putting it in the base zone doesn't depend on our mapping it. So currently there's a lot of those places where residential and commercial or employment are abutting, but there's no buffer overlay. So putting it in the base zone provides a more uniform treatment of all properties where those two zones are abutting each other.
So could you just explain, for those of us who are not experts at mapping and planning, what are we really talking about? Give me a concrete, how wide? What are you talking about?
It governs setbacks and, as Marty said, whether or not you can have vehicle access along that property, for example, truck access to an industrial site or something, and it covers landscaping standards. And so we're talking about, is it somewhere between 10 and 20 feet of setback and landscaping standards. It's different in each zone.
So it will define whether or not on a given property you can actually have access or not have access. Is that correct?
On that particular property line, yeah. In a lot of cases.
On that line where the buffer zone is
right.
Between
so
residential and industrial.
So on a corner lot, if the buffer was on one edge and not on the other, that would sort of force the access.
So it would say on that edge, no egress.
Right.
And then you mentioned landscaping. Tell me specifically, what are we talking about here in
so
terms of landscaping?
Typically when we have a landscape buffer, we have two standards. We have either what's called the L3, which is a high screen standard where you would have like a 5-foot setback of a 6-foot tall evergreen shrubs, or you would have what's called the L4 standard, which is a masonry wall. And so again, we have areas with the residential abutting against employment that don't currently have those buffering, setback, and landscaping requirements.
So this will require one of those two things.
It will require both.
It will require both a wall and landscaping.
So the people who already
Well-
have the buffer overlay will perceive a slight difference in the details of the standards, but the content is close. For people who don't already have the buffer overlay, this will introduce an elevated setback and landscaping
So the
standard.
goal here is to create a consistent standard? Is
Exactly.
that what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And then tell me a little bit about the setback. Because I'm sure when people hear about a buffer between an industrial zone and a residential neighborhood, that already piques my interest a lot. And so what are we really talking about here in terms of setbacks?
So a lot of the employment in industrial zones don't actually have setbacks
Have
because
none.
of the nature of that. And so this special situation imposes a setback of somewhere between 5 and 25 feet, which then that
in
landscaping.
5 to 25 feet, it would also then add along the buffer zone the requirement for shrubbery
Or a wall.
or a wall.
Or a
It's
wall.
not and, it's or?
Correct.
Okay,
And
got
it
Okay.
restricts the exterior work activities in that area as well. So you couldn't have like the lumberyard stacking right up against the property line fence or something.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that digression. Thanks.
And I think next week, when you have the code reconciliation project, if that is a continued interest to you, especially after the testimony you hear, again, the person that's writing the code will be here before you next week.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wanted to have some sense of the magnitude of what we're actually discussing there.
The two
Okay.
projects relate because this project is dealing with the map change and the other one is dealing with the code change. So.
Okay, and the consequence, and I'm sorry, colleagues, I just have this last question. The consequence of not doing this is you have non-uniform standards.
Correct.
And let me ask the obvious question, so what?
We would like to see a little more uniform treatment in this situation. We think there are folks who are living next to industrial and employment districts that would benefit from this, a more equitable treatment of this.
Okay, that's fair. I appreciate it. So
It's
this-
not the
this
end of
is-
the world, frankly, though.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, so this is an equity play, is that a fair generalization?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Well, it's a standardization. There's-
Yeah, I think that's a better,
It doesn't take into account equity, it takes into account what the rules are, making them clear.
Okay, so
it would be an equal
it's the
treatment if
consistency
you were
argument.
residential zone next to employment or industrial.
And it may save some time at BDS because they won't have to look up the specific location to answer this question anymore. It's a more general standard.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to touch upon some early testimony that you have been receiving. So as of 5 p.m. yesterday, there had been 34 items of testimony that council has received. In that grouping, there have been a number of new requests for map changes. There have been, again, concern over the removal of the buffer overlay zone, both generally but specific to the Willamette Heights neighborhood within the Northwest District Association. Additionally, there's been testimony that we heard when we were before the Planning and Sustainability Commission, but that testimony is continuing before you regarding a map change from CM2 to CM3D on Fremont and Mississippi. So we expect more testimony on that site as well. And then generally sites that received testimony either in opposition or in support on the proposed draft that came out in the fall, we are continuing to hear from community members on certain sites. So just a process update. We have been at this for about a year. We had a early discussion draft that came out in June of last year where that generated 53 public comments. On that discussion draft, we did send out a courtesy notice to both affected property owners, affected occupants, and folks within 100 feet of the proposed map changes. On the proposed draft that went before the Planning and Sustainability Commission, that is where we did send out the required Measure 56 public notice, as well as continuing on with the courtesy notices. And the legislative notice, we had 176 items of public testimony. And now we have the recommended draft, which is what is before you. It was released on February 5th. We sent out our public notices, legislative and courtesy notices, starting on February 16th.
I just want to highlight the courtesy notice. Part of that is under the new comprehensive plan, we're really making an effort to be more inclusive with who is notified of land use actions. And so notifying occupants or renters essentially is a change that was not our practice prior to this new comprehensive plan, and is we're attempting to be a more regular practice going forward.
So I'll probably want to come back up and talk about next steps. But we're having the hearing today. We intend or have a tentative date for council deliberation on April 4th. And then on May 24th, we have the council vote on the second reading. We are proposing for there to be an effective date also on May 24th. Initially, we were hoping to have the effective date actually go into June. It's not a practice that we like to do emergency ordinances, but there are just too many linkages between the zoning code that has to go into effect on May 24th and the map. So the buffer overlay being one, some additions and removals of RH zoning tied to the 4-to-1 FAR maps, and then all the changes that we're doing to the plan districts. They're very much tied to the zoning code chapters, and so just wanted to share that with you.
Good, and Marty, I might ask you at the very end of the session to put that slide up again, just
Absolutely.
so people know where the next steps are.
So I'm definitely anxious to hear public testimony, so I am including my overview.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions before we move on? So at this point, let's move on to the minor and technical amendments and errata. We're referencing the March 8th and March 13th staff memos that were distributed this afternoon. Can we get a motion to incorporate these amendments?
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Saltzman.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Fritz. Are there any other amendments that council members would like to declare? I think Commissioner Fish had
I have two amendments,
two.
Mayor.
Okay.
Let me hand them out. This is Fish Amendment number 1. And I'll explain them in a second. Actually, I'll do them in sequence. Colleagues, I have two different amendments that I would like to introduce this afternoon. The first is in support of testimony provided by the Bureau of Environmental Services. Through the Bureau's Willing Seller program, we have purchased a number of properties that are in different floodplains. The Bureau purchases properties like these that are prone to damage due to flood. We pay fair market price for the homes, we demolish the buildings, and then we restore the property to a more natural state that helps prevent future flooding and returns natural habitat for plants and wildlife. The Bureau has identified 13 of these properties that are currently zoned as residential. I am asking the council to convert these properties from their base residential zone to open space. And I have asked that these 13 properties collectively be titled Fish Amendment 1.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish on Fish 1 and a second from Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm now going to circulate what is Fish 2. There's some extras. And I'll just read a quick statement about this as it's being distributed. My second amendment comes at the request of Albertina Kerr. They have sent in testimony requesting a zone change on their properties from residential to commercial mixed use. The properties are in prime locations and are ideal for redevelopment. And Albertina Kerr is interested in redeveloping these underused properties and building housing with commercial space for their own purposes. One of their properties has split zoning on it with R1 on one portion and CS on the other portion, although the Central City Plan will update this to be CM3. Their other property is also zoned R1. Their specific request is to change the base zoning on all 3 lots from R1 to CM3, and I will introduce this as Fish Amendment 2.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish and a second from Commissioner Saltzman. Commissioner
question?
Clarify. Sure.
Either for Ms. Stockton or for
Sure.
Commissioner Fish. Obviously, the first one I'm very supportive of. The second one, were these changes requested as part of the comprehensive plan, or are these new?
Marty?
So these are new, it's a new request that we've received as of this comment period.
So the Planning Commission hasn't considered them either?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz, you have an amendment.
Thank you. I have an amendment which I'm passing out now,
Thank you.
and that is Portland Parks and Recreation submitted 2 trail requests which were inadvertently left off. So we did get them in on time, it's just that they got missed, and so I'm requesting the following regional trail segments be added to the comprehensive plan map. The first is Northwest Thurman connecting to the Willamette Greenway Trail along Northwest 15th, which is approximately 425 feet of trail. And the second is the East Delta Park connection to Marine Drive Trail, which is approximately 1,300 feet of trail.
Second. So Commissioner Fritz moves, and I second what we'll call Fritz number 1 for today. Colleagues, are there any other? Okay, great. So,
Mayor, can I just publicly say that yesterday, Marty and the Intrepid team came to my office for a boot camp exercise, walked me through all of these things, took my questions, some of which were pretty basic, and I think the public doesn't always get a sense of, in addition to all the work that staff has to do getting ready for hearings and interacting on things, they also have to bring commissioners up to speed, and I really appreciate the time and care that staff takes to make sure that we're well prepared for these hearings, and Marty, thank you very much.
Well said. So now we're going to hear public testimony about the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the map refinement project, now as amended. When you come up to testify, please begin each comment to the degree that you're able with the map change number and or the subject property addresses so that we can be clear with regard to what your comments are referencing. But before we start with regular testimony, we have a tradition in the chamber. If there's anybody with young children or special needs, we would encourage you to confer with the council clerk, and we'll get you up as soon as possible. So with that, Carla, why don't we have the first 3, please?
The first 3 are David Cole, Doug Klotz, and Jango Emerson. And they will be followed by Jeffrey Clare, Dana Kraschek, and Robert Johnson.
Very good. And for obvious reasons, if you could state your name for the record, 3 minutes, you'll see a light that turns yellow when you have 30 seconds left. It turns red when your time is expired. Please let us know if you are a lobbyist, if you're here representing an organization, that's helpful as well. We don't need to know your specific address unless it's germane to the revisions that you're referencing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Cole. I'm here about change number 1799 for 705 North Fremont and 815 North Fremont. I'm here representing about 30 people who live on or around these properties. Over a year ago, the former council voted in favor of rezoning these 2 properties from R25 to CM2. And at that time, all the neighbors and everyone that lived there considered that to be an equitable compromise between adding density in the city and taking into account that these properties immediately border residential homes on Albina and Borthwick. Last year, the property owner of 815 asked BPS to further upzone their property to CM3. It's a small residential lot, and convinced PCRI, who has 705, an affordable housing complex there called Elroy Gardens, to come along with that. Those of us who live in the neighborhood are worried that the 6 stories that CM3 provides right next to single and double family homes is going a little too far, and that CM2 that was already approved would really nicely step down from all the crazy development that's going on across the street to begin with. 30 of us submitted a petition to PSC. The Boys Elliott Neighborhood Association asked BPS to reconsider BPS's own staff recommended to PSC that keeping with the original CM2 designation was the best idea, but PSC decided to move forward with the CM3 zoning anyway. PCRI, which operates the affordable housing on 705, has told BPS that they can only afford to build the CM2 size, and we're fine with the original designation. The worry there is that with the new valuable zoning, they could be motivated to sell to a developer that would just put in more luxury condos and permanently displace the residents that live there today. Those members have been here before this council and testified. Other members of the community, people who have lived in the neighborhood for over 50 years, of all backgrounds, economic and racial, have given testimony saying that this sort of upzoning it's going to be too much. And only the owner of 815 and the PSC want this change. I understand we need more density in our city. I just hope that we can find a balance between the homeowners and the people who live in that neighborhood and the developers and the renters that follow them. And I hope that we're not all separated by 6 stories when that happens.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Doug Klotz, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm speaking on, you should have a copy of this in front of you. Speaking about 1717 and 1800, which is a property, several properties on Northeast Broadway, Northeast Halsey, and Northeast 45th. This is a large parcel. It's all currently zoned RX, and RX is not going to be allowed outside Central City now, so that it was needed to be changed. And what Planning and Sustainability Commission recommends is these all be rezoned to RH with a 4-to-1 FAR. Originally, the planner had recommended a lower zone, but Planning and Sustainability Commission thought that that was more appropriate, and I agree with Planning and Sustainability. It's this, and if you look at the map and how that parcel fits on the map, it's surrounded quite by CM3 at the south and the west, and CM2 above, and RX on this end. And RH it includes a 14-story Hollywood East apartments, an 8-story Hollywood townhouse, and 3 2-story courtyard apartments, which are over at this end. You can see them in that aerial. And directly to the south is the new Providence Office Park building, which is 6 stories. So it's RH. Seems RH with 4-to-1 is a high-density multi-dwelling zone. It's the code in 33-120-030 says allowed housing is characterized by medium to high height and relatively high percentage of building coverage. RH zones will be well served by transit facilities and are near commercial services. And this zone meets all those standards. This area meets all those standards. There's within 1 block of the Hollywood Transit Center, served by 3 different MAX lines, 3 different bus lines, and there's also the number 12 on Sandy, which is right here. And this town center has arguably more transit and amenities than even Gateway. They're in the Hollywood Plan District. The maximum height on that property, on that area, is 100 feet. And of course, the existing tower is 176, but 100 feet is what is the tallest that's allowed in Hollywood today. So I support keeping that at RH. I know you may get some testimony asking for something lower, but I just don't think it's appropriate right there with all the tall buildings already there and a block from transit or 2 blocks from transit. And since I have more time, number 1777 is on Southeast Main and 25th. It's a split parcel, picture aerial on the back, which is it's half in R1, half in R5. R2 makes a lot of sense. That's what staff and PSC recommended. I would even argue it could go to R1. There are people on the dead-end street to the west of it who are arguing that that is too much for the neighborhood. On the other hand, on that half block, there's 8 houses and 4 of them are duplexes or fourplexes. So it's already at a missing middle thing going on there. So I think the R2 at least, if not R1, are appropriate.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Jango Emerson. I own a piece of property. The address is 4404 Northeast Holman. It's over by Fernhill Park. I've owned it for about 5 or 6 years, and it's a 15,000 plus square foot lot. When I first came into the city to zoning planning, they said, wait, hold on, because it's zoned R10, but there is R5 all around it. And they said, you know, there's going to be a change in the comprehensive plan and overlays, et cetera, and in the base plan. Wait and see what happens with your parcel. It's 15,000 plus square feet. If you look at the property, it is appropriate for 2 nice-sized homes for the neighborhood. All the neighbors that I've spoken to have no issues with changing that zoning to R5. Again, right next to it is existing R5. I see no reason why it should still be R10. I understand that the owner can go through a type 3 zoning amendment. This would be sort of unduly onerous and time-consuming. In speaking with Nan Stark, Nan told me to come in and make a Hail Mary, so to speak, here at this meeting. I appreciate that. Again, 4404 Northeast Holman, just a last-ditch effort to change to what would be a very logical R5 zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
If it was R5, though, you'd be 3 units, and you might have to do 3. Would that be all right?
I really honestly, too, is what it would be. I don't think the shotgun row houses thing is what the neighbors would like or what anybody would like. It's,
So then what you actually want is R7, because if it's 15,000 square feet.
I'll take R7.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Next 3, please, Carla.
Are Jeffrey Clare, Dana Krawczyk, and Robert Johnson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can I start speaking?
Yeah, sure.
If you just leave the microphones off when you're done speaking, you'll be fine. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Clare. I'm following up from Mr. Jango. I'm interested in purchasing and developing that property. So speaking to Amanda, yes, you can actually get 3. You could fit 3 if you had R5 zoning. And I would like to do a cottage cluster in there, possibly 3 with 3 ADUs. And I think it would serve the neighborhood much better than a large McMansion, which now with that R10 zoning, that's the only thing that can be built on that. It's a very onerous, it's $100,000. It's a year to go through these type 3 zone map amendment. And it is abutting an R5 right now, and there is an R2 right across the street. So I concur with Mr. Jango that R7 would be wonderful, but R5, in my opinion, would be even better.
Thank you.
So Mr. Jango testified that the neighbors are supportive. Do you agree with that?
Yes, honestly, I think R7 would be easier with the neighbors than an R5.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Krawczyk, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I submitted testimony digitally, but also handed some out because there's a map on it, and you should receive it. This is a new amendment request on behalf of XPO Logistics. The address of the property is 2169 Northwest Thurman, which is the northeast corner of Northwest Thurman and Northwest 22nd. It's adjacent to the EC company. We're requesting that this parcel, the entire parcel, be rezoned from IG1 to CM3 with a design review and Main Street, Center's Main Street overlay. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is to avoid a non-conforming use and development, so that's category 3 that Marty spoke about. And the second is to correct a mistake in a split zone, which is the 4th category. I'll start with the non-conforming use and development. This property is included in the Conway Master Plan area, so it's a unique property. Even though it's zoned IG1, as part of the adopted master plan, EXD uses are currently allowed on that property. The maximum height is 150 feet. Base FAR is 3-to-1 with transfers available. It's subject to design review, and its transportation impacts have been studied extensively with that kind of development. It's subject to the LID that will fund the jug handle, which is a $7 million transportation improvement, and it's also subject to TDM measures. So it's essentially EXD property now, even though the base zone is IG1. Nothing, new construction hasn't occurred on that property yet, but we expect that it will within the term of the master plan, which is until 2022. So after the master plan expires, that would be non-conforming use and non-conforming development. So we're asking that the zone be changed now so that we can avoid that non-conforming development. The mistake in the split zone is because the comp plan designation has been converted already to MUU, which is the highest intensity mixed-use urban comp plan designation. A portion of the property already has the Main Street overlay. So it's got an IG base zone that limits retail and an M overlay that requires retail. So there's a conflict, there's a mistake right there. So we're asking that the entire parcel get the appropriate CM3 zoning, which is what the balance of the master plan is. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Was this considered when we did the comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan designated it as MUU, so yes, it was. But the base zone, for whatever reason, wasn't changed.
And did you raise it with the Planning Commission?
I didn't, because we didn't realize this was an issue until late last year.
Got it, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Johnson. I am speaking about the property that is at the corner of Sheridan and Southwest 5th Avenue. And as I stated, I'm Bob Johnson, the president and CEO of Terwilliger Plaza, which is, as we proudly state, a community of empowered and engaged people. Terwilliger Plaza is a nonprofit life plan community, also known as a continuing care retirement community located near downtown Portland. A life plan community is a community that provides a broad range of services to persons 65 years of age and older. Founded in the 1950s, Terwilliger Plaza received its first residents following completion of the original structure in 1962. We currently serve about 350 members who reside in independent or assisted living apartments. We also employ about 170 people with living wage jobs. The Planning Commission has recommended approval of the map refinement project, including adjusting the zoning of a lot that Terwilliger Plaza controls, and that is at Sheridan and Southwest 5th Avenue. That will combine all of the Terwilliger Plaza property under the preferred zoning of RH, high-density residential. I thank the Planning Commission for supporting this change. I urge a positive vote by the Council. I thank you for helping Terwilliger Plaza resolve this zoning issue, which will allow us to explore the possibility of a major expansion of our services. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Bob, can I just make one observation?
Sure.
Each of us gets invited probably annually to come up to Terwilliger Plaza and participate in a breakfast forum. And I have to just say, as an elected official, I think that's the hardest forum to prepare for that we go through. It's the most challenging because you look up and you've got retired judges, elected officials, land use lawyers. It's a murderer's row of people that follow the city very closely. And I always figured,
you ought to sit in my chair.
Huh?
You ought to sit in my chair.
It's a pleasure.
They serve you breakfast, Commissioner Fish?
It's
Mr. Mayor.
Don't they serve everybody breakfast now?
No.
It's an incredible cross-section of our community. And
it really is.
For someone like me that wasn't born here, it's also kind of a history lesson because of just the remarkable people that live there.
Well, we thank you very much for your support, and any of you come, I'll make you a deal for breakfast, certainly.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Is this the site that we considered during the comprehensive plan, or is this another one?
No, this is the same one. Yeah, this is the same one, and I'm just thanking you for your support.
Yeah, as I remember, we said come back. We'll do it in the next package. Is that
Yes,
correct? Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next three, please.
Are John Ross, John Brenton, and Samuel Eckhart, and they'll be followed by Dean Vanderbush, Gina Vanderbush, and Lou Montgomery.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you start
afternoon.
for us?
Yes. I'm John Ross. Thanks for this opportunity to talk. I'm testifying about change number 1799, 705 and 815 North Fremont from CM2 to CM3D. I've lived on Albina for 15 years, and I don't oppose high density, but I do question the scale of a building of this size, up to 7 stories, on a street of predominantly 1 to 2 story homes. I worry about the shadow well that will swallow my garden and discourage my chickens from laying, and the continued loss of urban canopy on our block. Most of all, though, I worry that this model of density, which encourages luxury apartments and condos, is erasing the racial, economic, and age diversity of our neighborhood. No matter how well-intended, this model is overwhelming our neighborhood with white, beer, and entertainment consumers of a certain class. The Elroy Gardens housing development on Fremont between Albina and Borthwick is home to low-income neighbors who are racially diverse, frequently immigrants, and includes some of our older neighbors on the block. Many of them also happen to be taxi cab drivers who make use of the ample parking lot on the property, I know parking lot is a dirty word nowadays, and rightly so, but I think it's important to remember how this model of density may be displacing a unionized immigrant cab driving workforce living in the heart of the city for a homogeneous mass of unprotected contract workers circling and polluting constantly on our streets with Uber and Lyft decals on their windows. At some point, we need to look at the unintended consequences of the aggressive infill development that's happening in North Portland. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Commissioner Daly, did you have a
No,
question?
John's just an old friend, and I'm enjoying his testimony.
Very good.
Yes.
Is this the site that you and I lost on in the comprehensive plan, or are they doing even more on Fremont?
I'm not sure. I haven't been engaged until recently, but Dave Cole, who sat here first testifier, was probably involved back.
I'll ask staff about it. Thank you.
Very good. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is John Brenton. I'm here representing Greater Portland Bible Church in Southwest Portland. We thank you for this opportunity to testify. Notice was only given shortly last night, so forgive me as I read my script here.
Not a problem.
Greater Portland Bible Church and Habitat for Humanity request a zoning map change to lot 9900, located on Capitol Hill Road from R7 to R2. Zoning for the purpose of providing permanently affordable home ownership. The property is owned by Greater Portland and adjacent to our worship facilities and parking lot. The lot is also an environmental conservation overlay zone, which limits how it can be developed. Greater Portland is in discussions with Habitat to sell the parcel at a discounted price to allow for the development of affordable housing as a part of the ministry of Greater Portland Bible Church and the mission of Habitat. The two organizations have a history of partnership, which started several years ago, actually finished development in 2015 on a half-acre parcel. It was sold at a discount, so it could develop, Habitat could develop 7 units of affordable home ownership housing. This parcel is 6877 and is adjacent to the proposed parcel and is zoned R2. The change meets the 2035 comprehensive plan goal of affordable housing development in areas with close proximity to transit, services, and amenities. It also meets the anti-displacement goals and the goal of helping to close the minority home ownership gap. The site is within a half mile of the Hillsdale Commercial Center, Burlingame Commercial Area, and Southwest Barber Boulevard. We thank you in advance for your consideration.
Thanks for being here.
Can I ask a question, Mayor?
Yeah, please. Commissioner Fish.
We have a package before us of upzoning some affordable housing developments, and the theory there is we want to give people the ability to serve even more people. You are proposing to partner with Habitat to build on your footprint, correct?
Correct.
And I'm going to ask staff about that later, but there is underutilized church property throughout the city, and there are some places like in Inner Northeast where there are some churches that have an older congregation, and they're land rich. And this question's come up quite a bit about is that, you know, what should be our role in facilitating housing that's within the footprint of I'm saying church, it could be a synagogue or it could be any faith institution, but I'll use church as a shorthand. And from my point of view, the benefit, of course, is you've got the built-in connection with the faith community. You've got a neighbor that is caring about the people that are living there, and so it's kind of a home run. So I'm going to be interested in knowing more about that. But I also think that as churches that have declining membership in certain parts of our city are grappling with this question, if we are more flexible and allowing housing on the site, we actually are able to save the church and create a synergy, which I think is very positive for the community.
I agree.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon.
My name is Samuel Eckhart, and I serve as the construction coordinator with Habitat for Humanity, Portland Metro East. I'm here today to request your consideration of a zoning map change for the same parcel that John mentioned, tax lot 9900. It's in the Hillsdale neighborhood on Southwest Capitol Hill Road that is owned by the Greater Portland Bible Church. It is adjacent to a 7-home condo project that Habitat built and sold in 2015. The church was also the previous owner of that property and sold it to Habitat at a discount so that we could provide home ownership opportunities to low-income working families. In fact, Mayor Wheeler, you may remember speaking at the key ceremony that summer when we were selling those 7 homes. The church is again willing to consider selling property to Habitat at a discounted price, which is very exciting given the challenges affordable housing developers face in finding property in today's housing market. While this is a much larger parcel at 3.5 acres, the goal is to build 25 to 30 units of housing with parking in the form of townhome-style condominiums. We are requesting that the zoning be changed to R2 from the current R7 zoning in order to help mitigate the development challenges presented on the site, including the environmental conservation overlay zone. We expect only a small portion of this overall site would be developed given the density of trees and slope. The homes Habitat would develop on the site would be permanently affordable homeownership units, which means that not only will they be sold to first-time low-income home buyers initially, but they will remain affordable to buyers in the future. This will help ensure economic diversity in the Hillsdale neighborhood. This project would also help close the minority homeownership gap, as 80% of Habitat home buyers are households of color with an average annual income under $40,000. Habitat also builds homes to meet the specific needs of families, and 30% of our buyers have had a family member with a disability. In closing, I'd like to thank you for considering this project that would help provide more than 100 people with stable, affordable housing in a neighborhood with great schools, access to transit, and nearby amenities.
So was this amendment heard by the Planning and Sustainability Commission?
No.
I just want to personally thank you, Greater Portland Bible Church, for really being a true community-facing church. I mean, from what you've done with Habitat for Humanity to sharing your facilities from everyone from Frisbee golf to AA meetings. I mean, you are a center of the community, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Didn't realize you were aware of that. Thanks. Appreciate
Well,
it.
I know Dan's aware of that because he was standing right next to me at that
Key ceremony, yeah.
key ceremony.
Yeah.
We were commenting on the Frisbee golf, and we were concerned we hadn't brought our Frisbee, so we really couldn't practice that day. But that was a great project, and I appreciate the good work you guys are trying to do here. Commissioner Fritz?
I was just wondering, do you still have a pastor one of the pastors' names is Amanda Fritz? Because could you please apologise to her? I'm really sorry. She must have just a dreadful time of having to put up with all that. There used to be, there was or used to be somebody with the same name as me who was a pastor there, and I have always looked for the opportunity to apologise for embroiling her and besmirching her good name.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all three of you. Appreciate your testimony. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Dean Vanderbush, Gina Vanderbush, and Lou Montgomery. And they'll be followed by Scott Doherty, Gary Okamoto, and Gary Daniels.
Good afternoon. Would you like to start, please? Sure. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. I'm testifying in regards to 10840 Southwest 55th Avenue in West Portland Park.
And could I get your name for that?
Dean Vanderbush.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. I come before you today to request a zoning change in West Portland Park, Block 1, from R10 to R7. West Portland Park Block 1 is unique. It is the only block in West Portland Park that is zoned R10. This is causing a major problem for my daughter and me. We bought a lot in West Portland Park, Block 1, because the lot is zoned R10, we're not allowed to build a home on the lot. This is a good buildable lot, according to city planners, and we consulted with them before buying the lot, and they said there shouldn't be any problem with building on it. But we later discovered through the zoning that it can't be built on because in West Portland Park, this whole block was owned by the land developer a few months in July 26, 1979. As you probably know, there is a rule in the zoning that prohibits building a home on a lot if it was ever under the same ownership as an abutting property after July 26, 1979. So under the current zoning, because the land developer owned the entire block, for a few months after July 79, our lot must sit vacant forever. As you can imagine, this is a terrible disappointment to my daughter and me. If the commissioners change the zoning for this block from R10 to R7, there are two provisions in the zoning that would allow us to build a home. If the zoning is not changed, the lot will remain vacant forever. So I'm requesting that the commissioners change the zoning from R10 to R7. As I said before, Block 1 is the only block in all of West Portland Park that is zoned R10. And most of the lots are between 5,000 and 8,000 square feet. And city planners have told me that the lot sizes are more consistent with an R7 or even R5 zoning than R10.
And what's the size of your lot?
The lot, our size is 6,850 square feet.
And it was 10840?
Yes.
Southwest 55th?
Yes.
And was this taken to the Planning Commission?
No, this is a new amendment request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gina Vanderbush. I'm also speaking for 10840 Southwest 55th Avenue. My father, Dean Vanderbush, and I, as you just heard, purchased a piece of property in West Portland Park, hoping to build a house on it. Unfortunately, because Block 1 is Zone R10, we cannot build. I am requesting that you change the zoning in Block 1 from R10 to R7 so that we can build a home. I would like to also emphasize the huge impact building a home will have on my life. I am 25 years old. I am an Oregon State grad and have been a Portland resident since 2016. This piece of property is an opportunity for me to invest in my future and stand on my own 2 feet. My father and my father before him have built homes for their families, and it's a tradition for us to do this once or twice in our lifetime. I would like to continue this tradition and settle down in Portland. Building a home on this property would be a life achievement for me. Generally speaking, previous generations were able to save money, buy a home, and create a family and future on their own. Now it's different. People my age cannot buy a home without going into crippling debt. It is very difficult for most people in metropolitan areas with an average salary to save money for a home because of high rent prices. Our lot is within the urban growth boundary, and developing on it would be consistent with urban growth principles of keeping commerce, transportation, housing within city limits. As a person who holds a degree in natural resources and soil science, I understand the effects that development has on the environment. We're not asking for any open land to be developed. It's already an existing lot. We're not asking for any financial help or services either. I appreciate your consideration of my request. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, you haven't owned another lot in this area?
No.
Previous, this is the only lot you own?
Yes.
And what's the cross street?
It's Southwest 55th Avenue, and there's a private access road that allows access for the property. It's this little block right here. Here's Highway 5, and there's a little alleyway, a private drive that allows access for these lots.
Okay, I'll look into it.
Right, thank you.
Thank you both. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lou Montgomery. I'm here representing some property owners that have property at 6416 North Greeley Avenue. This is their property here, and these are proposed zone change to CM1. So their lot is directly abutting commercial and also directly across the street from commercial property. They've been in the Portland community for over 50 years now. They've raised their family here. Palmer, the owner, grew up on North Webster Street. His father, he's very proud of his father being a Portland police officer for 17 years. His fiance's family grew up in St. John's. So like I said, I'm asking that this property be changed to the CM1, the mixed use. Some of the characteristics of the CM1 is that it is a commercial mixed-use zone. It's normally in areas where they have a lower density, and this property currently is R5. Most of the buildings they expect to be about 3 stories tall. And I looked on the Greeley Street Corridor study, and it's really interesting to see that under the categories at the bottom of that study, it shows that 0% of mixed-use commercial and residential is in this corridor. This is also about 1.5 miles from the University of Portland. So what the owners are hoping to do is to develop this property with doing affordable living upstairs and the mixed-use commercial downstairs. They thought, or at the main level. they thought that that could be, you know, possibly student housing and also more affordable housing for anybody that lives in this area. So we really appreciate your consideration on this. They plan on staying here. They plan on, their kids are getting ready to go to college, and they're hoping to keep this in their family. But they'd really like to see the avenue of being able to turn that into a mixed use. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three, please.
Next three are Scott Doherty, Gary Okamoto, and Gary Daniels. And they'll be followed by Julie Cantonwine, May Smith, and Rich Rogers.
Good afternoon. Would you like to start, sir? Sure. Thank you.
All right. Scott Doherty, and I'm here representing 1809 Northwest Davis Street at the corner of Northwest 18th Avenue. I'm here to request that the council consider a comprehensive plan and zoning map change for a quarter block property located at 1809 Northwest Davis. The property is currently used as a dental office and a surface parking lot. The comprehensive plan change, it would be proposed from high-density multi-dwelling to mixed-use urban center, and the zone map change would be from RH to CM3. The property is owned by my father, John Doherty. The dental practice occupying the office space was owned by my father until 2017 when I purchased it from him. We're a third-generation family dental practice serving the Portland area for 75 years with over 40 years in our current location. Our central location with easy access and on-site parking are extremely important assets to the business. Moving locations would create a significant hardship on the existing dental practice in the form of downtime and access for our patients if we move out of our central location. The current RH zone limits our long-term growth prospects and presents significant barriers to our ability to expand our business at this location. And in addition, if the building were to be lost to a catastrophic event, our current zoning would make it difficult or impossible to rebuild the dental office as it exists currently. The proposed CM3 zone would allow the office building and Doherty Dental, the practice, to be permitted outright. Lastly, the 20,000 square foot surface parking lot abutting my father's property to the west, owned by Trinity Cathedral, due to our long-standing mutually beneficial relationship when it comes to parking during the week and on the weekends, we have ongoing discussions related to coordinated redevelopment of both properties with potential for medical office space and shared parking structure. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Okamoto. Thank you for listening to my testimony, City Commissioners and Mayor Wheeler.
Thanks for being here.
I'd like to bring your attention today to focus on a property at 5505 Southeast 28th Avenue, right across from Reed College in the Eastmoreland area. Earlier last year, when I received some notices about the need in Portland for expanded industrial areas, I guess that's the comprehensive plan, I saw how it impacted my property, and in this case, the property is underdeveloped or not developed. And so at the western side of 67 feet of it, it's undeveloped, so I didn't think too much of it at the time. However, in talking to Marty Stockton earlier this year about expanding some potential commercial or residential activities or buildings on the property, I was told that the existing store, that's a kind of a fruit and vegetable store, is in fact a non-conforming situation. And hearing that, I contacted the store operator, Mr. Daniels here, and told him about this concern of non-conforming status. Currently, the site is residential 2, and my request today is for the City Council to consider changing the zoning from R2 to CM1. So a little bit of history. The property, I purchased it from my grandparents' estate 6 years ago. They first purchased the property in 1949 and have operated the Moreland Market at that site for the last 40 years. Afterwards, Mr. Daniels has been continuing to operate that store under the name Very Good Produce. And so we'd like to, first of all, request the CM1 change so that Mr. Daniels can viably operate his business and continue to do so for him, his wife, and his son, and for me to also be in conformance with current zoning, and also in the future to consider food cart or it's sort of a short-term goal, because right now there's sporadic food carts in the industrial zones that under the comprehensive plan in that specific area. There's enough property there, 1 acre, that could have food courts or food trucks. Plus, in the near future, my plan, based upon the requirement of investment, could actually help solve Portland's issues with low-income housing, college student housing, since it's next to Reed College, and also housing for senior citizens like my mother. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir, and perfect timing. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Daniels, and he covered all of my testimony. But I was just going to add that in 1928, in May, Giuseppe Polina tried to get this changed because he started the fruit stand. So it's actually been in operation for 90 years. And not only is it for my benefit to support my family, the community seems to really appreciate that you can get produce from the local farmers brought into Portland. So that's just my main thing, and I would like to keep operating it. And I didn't realize that we were on a revocable permit after 90 years, but evidently we still are, so.
Commissioner Fritz.
Have you visited the neighborhood association to ask for their support?
Not yet, but I mean, essentially, we're basically an island because there's the Ravellis, which is next to the golf course, Eastbourne Golf Course, and then everything else is Reed College.
Yeah, I just would encourage you to, look up the neighborhood association, put it down Portland Maps, and it'll tell you what the neighborhood association, and just go talk with them, because when we come back to vote on these things, it goes a lot better if the neighborhood association supports the proposal, and it sounds like this is a valued institution, so I certainly would appreciate getting a letter from them saying that they support it.
So for clarification, that would be the Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association, or that would be Reed College?
Not the, it would be the neighborhood association. So if you go to portlandmaps.com, it'll tell you what your neighborhood association is for that address if you just dive it in. And
so Marty said she'd give you all the skinny on it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. Next three, please.
The next three are Julie Cantonwine, and it'll be Mac and Penelope Smith. And they'll be followed by Rich Rogers, Jeff Carr, and Jason Leonard.
Very good. Good afternoon. Would you like to start, please?
Sure. I'm here in support of Mr. Okamoto. A couple months ago, I decided to come back from Maryland and do business in Portland. I've been doing business in Portland for the last couple of decades, and I'm a chef. And I wanted to open a restaurant in Portland, and financially, it's going to be a little bit out of reach. And so in order to bring our Cuban hand pie bowl cart, using fresh ingredients and fresh food ingredients, and to be able to open that right next to the Very Good Produce stand actually would be a wonderful place to do business, because we do support local farmers, and we locally source our food and our produce and our meats. So I'm in here to support Mr. Okamoto and Mr. Gary with the food produce stand, because I think it's a great idea, and it's a great area. It's right across the street from Reed College. And I love the story behind how the land became, and the whole story about how this produce stand has been operating on this revocable, thing for 90 years. It really should stay there. It is definitely a community staple there. So that's all.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Mac Smith. I'm talking about the 2125 Northwest 33rd Avenue and in Willamette Heights. There is a buffer zone there, and they're talking about coming closer within 10 feet of that particular property. I live a couple houses up. This issue was settled at one time before. in the 90s, and because they were going to put a truck stop there, which would include a lot of pollution, et cetera. I am a chemist, and I've worked with all the state and local labs on air quality and water, et cetera. This is a geologically unstable hillside. It has silt at 7 and 11 feet, and it had a landslide that closed the St. Helens Highway in the 50s. It separates our particular 100-year-old neighborhood from becoming an annex of the industrial zone. Changing the buffer designation puts us in the same visual, auditory, and environmental hazard as if we lived right in the industrial zone. There's three springs that are on the west side of the street, and they've been there for years. And there's also a spring on the eastern side of that particular property. There's also a sewage opening that is cleaned out on a regular basis. So there's a lot of things going on. The present buffer zone being kind of, it has, I would say, it has trees, it has bushes, it has everything that's there. It's not a very stable piece of property and would require quite a bit of work. I guess I'm worried about, as a chemist, I'm worried about the pollution and et cetera. They have some, right now they have quite a few places that repair trucks along the way. And this would probably include something of that nature. They were thinking about a truck stop where they would do fueling, repair, et cetera. And I just wish you would reconsider this. It would disturb a lot of things in that particular area.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Penelope Smith, and Mac is my husband, and I'm representing the Willamette Heights Association. We're very concerned about this area because the present buffer zone barely keeps out the noise from St. Helens Road, including trains and the commercial noise from other side of the road and the road itself. There would be more noise pollution from business and from St. Helens Road with less of a buffer zone if that was developed, which it would be very hard to develop it because it has so many creeks running through it, and it has lots and lots of vegetation, a lot of wildlife uses that area, and environmentally it would be kind of a disaster if that was really developed. And it would really lower the value of our homes if it was put into a development where it was a commercial business that added a lot of pollution. If the business would have anything to do with diesel repair or truck stoppages, there will be a tremendous amount of pollution with or without the buffer zone. The value of our houses would take a full hit with all of the above houses I have mentioned. Whomever wants to build there could care less. We kind of feel this is more about money, and we can't understand why anybody would want to develop that with all that's going on in that area. And it's such a steep incline, we don't know how they would be able to do it without building a huge wall, which would not really prevent a landslide because it's such a steep incline. So that is our concern, and we'd like you to reconsider that, keeping the buffer zone that's there presently and has been there. And this was settled in the 90s, and now it's come up again that somebody wants to develop that area. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate all three of you.
Thank you.
The next three are Rich Rogers, Jeff Carr, and Jason Leonard. And they'll be followed by Larissa Zimmerman, Mel Hatzos, and Christopher Rosing.
Good afternoon. Would you like to start, sir? Thank you.
I'm Jason Leonard. I just
Thanks,
found out
Jason.
about this a couple hours ago, so I don't have much prepared. But I own the building on 3587 Northeast Prescott Street. It's an old grocery store building built in the 20s. And from the 70s until I bought it in 2013, it was run by an upholstery business. And now I run my poster restoration business out of it. It's the Affiche Studio and Gallery. And the reason I found out about this is I'm in the middle of a land use review. I'm trying to expand on top. And it was brought up that potentially it could be up for rezoning, so I got in under the wire a couple hours ago. I think it makes sense to change it from non-conforming to a CR. I just learned about CR today, but I did a little research, and basically just anything I do in there as a non-conforming status is very tricky. And it's always been a commercial building. It's a unique spot in the neighborhood. You know, I spent a lot of time and energy restoring it. It's a unique thing in the neighborhood, and I just think even for the future, it makes sense to have a conforming status.
So I don't remember what CR is. What kind of use do you want to have to be allowed on it?
Well, now I'm forgetting a little bit, but it's basically commercial residential mixed use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mostly just run my private studio out of there, but sometimes do gallery events. And I'd like to do more for the neighborhood. Everybody that talks to me about the building wishes more was happening in there, or just they like the building. And I think it would make things easier for the expansion I'm doing too. Just non-conforming is a very tricky thing to go through the land use review. But yeah.
So the just straight CR zoning doesn't come with a specific height limit. Its building height is intended to be compatible with the scale of surrounding residentially zoned areas. So how high are those surrounding?
Everything in a block radius is a older two-story house. But beyond that, there's a lot of new development that is definitely 30 feet. A lot of new construction. So this is what I've been running into with the land use review, because I was just under the assumption that 30 feet, I could do 30 feet, so I've been designing it based on that. But they say that it's too high, even though it's the allowable height. So I've been trying to bring it back down to around 22, which would be the size of a two-story house.
I'm familiar with this property and with Affiche Studios, and it is an interesting just little anomaly in this neighborhood along Prescott. There aren't a lot of commercial opportunities, so.
And Prescott is a pretty major thoroughfare, and it really could have been like a lot of these other pockets, like 30th and Killingsworth, where it ended up being a four-corner business. I mean, it's an old brick building. The house next to it, actually, the guy who lives there, his grandparents built that house and this building. So I'm friends with him, but he's told me a lot about the history of it. But yeah, for whatever reason, it just became a one building corner. But Prescott right there gets a lot of traffic, and it's kind of this walkable thoroughfare to Wilshire Park. So I get a lot of foot traffic, and it's just always been known. It's been there for 90 years, so.
So I would suggest you contact Marty Stockton and have a chat with her about specifically what the right zone would be. And again, as I've said to other people, going to the neighborhood association, since you just thought about it, it would be good to get their support before the next, before we make our decision.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jeff Carr. I'm the CEO of Albertina Kerr, and I'm here to support Commissioner Fish's amendment related to our property. We have a historic property which is our headquarters in Northeast Portland at 424 Northeast 22nd. And during the new plan that was developed, our historic property was upgraded to CM3 zone, and we have two parcels at 2307 Northeast Flanders that is a parking lot and a thrift store. And we operate it all as, and it's been there since 1920s, pretty much as its own campus. And so the two parcels that are not a part of the historic building parcel were remaining R1. And so we would like to have those consistently zoned, all CM3. And the reason that's important, we didn't realize this was all happening until we were looking into actually how we're going to restore our building. And we are presently in the process of developing 120 units of affordable housing for our workforce to try and really target low-wage workers in our campus on 162nd with between Halsey and Gleason. And so we would love to have the opportunity to actually consider developing this property in the future to increase the stock of affordable housing for workforce folks in our community. So we would respectfully hope you'll support the commissioners.
So colleagues, I'm new to this conversation, and some people that we respect, really highly regard in the community, have started to think about this. And the concept that really has drawn me in is that we have nonprofit providers in our community that are land rich and are currently having trouble recruiting people for certain positions because of the housing market. And the idea that Albertina Kerr and others are thinking about is, what if we leveraged the land on our campus to build affordable housing so that we were able to offer someone not just a job, but a place to live that's also conveniently located. There are a multitude of nonprofit entities that are in the same situation, where they're competing for a workforce that's being pushed out of the community, that are rich in land. And it seemed to me that it's a very big discussion that we ought to start engaging. I can't think of a better synergy with our climate action goals and many of our other values to have, these developments on site. Now, there's some legal issues they're going to have to work out. I don't know how the Fair Housing Act applies. I don't know. There are specific legal provisions that say you can build senior housing only for and therefore restricted to seniors. I don't know about employers building housing that's then deemed a benefit that they offer employees. That's a legal question. But I do think the concept of leveraging that resource and then having people live and work in close proximity is brilliant. And I hope it's something that we can find a way to support, and Albertina Kerr is sort of in the front of the line, in the queue, in terms of wanting to test this assumption.
Well, and I appreciate that, Commissioner. We actually, our goal is to test this on our campus out in Gresham. I mean, I wish we were on the east side of 162nd. We'd be technically in the city, but on our Gresham campus, and we actually got a planning grant from the Meyer Memorial Trust specifically to bring together 5 of the 6 largest nonprofit human service organizations in Oregon, who are all struggling with the same issue. And we're in the process of identifying the parts of our property through this grant that could be available for housing. And actually, I had a meeting yesterday. You were talking about churches yesterday. There are 6 Methodist churches that gave me their property addresses. And so with the partnership with Girding Edlin, we are looking at all of these parcels and looking at what we think we could actually develop in terms of the numbers of units of affordable housing, and essentially use our land that we own outright as equity to put into the deals, and then figure out how to use a combination of low-income tax credits and traditional financing, and then find equity financing that would enable us to bridge that gap to build really targeted workforce housing.
By the way, just one last comment. There are plenty of employers in town that, as part of a recruitment strategy, offer incentives where they will help people with down payments if they want to buy a home, other kinds of things. I will tell you that when my wife got out of graduate school and was thinking about her first teaching job, one of the questions that she asked employers was, does it come with any housing on the campus? Is there family-friendly housing? And employers increasingly that can answer yes to that are in a more competitive position. So I think the concept is really worthy of exploring.
Well, we surveyed our 700 plus employees and got a 44% response rate, over 300 responses. 60% of the people that we surveyed just kind of said, we're thinking about doing this. 60% of our employees said, if you did it, we really would like to take advantage of it. So it really demonstrated to our board that there's a significant need out there amongst our low-wage employees.
And this is R1 to what?
Our historic building is CM3.
R1 to CM3.
And so it's R1 to CM3, yeah.
And am I correct in that it doesn't seem, there's no minimum or maximum density associated with commercial mixed use? So we can give the zoning, but we can't compel a minimum density? Yeah.
You're asking the wrong person. I did talk to Marty about this, and Marty.
For nod,
yeah,
or
okay.
yeah, sorry. We can take it offline. It's just interesting because the residential zoning does come with maximum. I'm just curious how many we can squeeze on
It's
there.
my understanding, what we could develop right now on the parking lot, essentially, we can't use the CM3 zoning for our historic building because we can't knock it down. Right. So it's really worthless on that property. But if we switch from R1 to CM3 on the parking lot in the other thrift store building, I believe it goes from enabling us to build about 19 units of a housing upwards of 277, depending on probably a little less than that based on the setbacks and things like that.
But you're not going to get rid of the thrift store, are you?
We certainly have loyal thrift store shoppers, and so we're not suggesting we're going to rid ourselves of that.
I think I hear a friendly amendment.
I could be convinced of approval.
All right, I'm going to say this and move us along.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Rich. How are you doing?
Hey, good afternoon. Mayor, Commissioners, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Rich Rogers with Community Development Partners. We are affordable housing developers. We have a portfolio of around 1,200 units spread over 15 communities, and we have about 600 more actively in the pipeline here in Portland today. I'm here to talk about a couple of parcels right across the street from each other on Mallory in Northeast Alberta. The addresses are 126 Northeast Alberta and then 126W/I Northeast Alberta, which is the parking lot attached to the Abbey across the street. The staff report refers to one of them. Our initial request related to both, but I'll speak to both of them quickly. On the parking lot, we're requesting a zone change to CM2. This is a parcel that's a couple blocks off of MLK, a couple blocks off of the Vancouver-Williams couplet. There's a lot of activity there. We feel like this will just stitch that together nicely. We propose this parcel as one of 4 that residential or mixed-use buildings that include apartments that will encompass 160 units spread along Alberta from Mallory to Northeast 27th, 100% affordable with affordable commercial space on the ground floor. And that's the request for the mixed-use zoning. We're in talks with BICEP, the Black Investment Corporation for Economic Progress, about managing and hopefully owning the ground floor affordable commercial space so that nonprofits and aspiring business owners can retain and establish and deepen some connection to a community that's been heavily gentrified. The housing will all be aligned with the city's north-northeast preference policy. And essentially, we need the CM2 zone change to both make the affordable commercial work and in order for our pro forma to pencil out on the total 160 unit project across the 4 sites. The other site that we're requesting a zone change on is right across the street. That's the former Mallory Avenue Baptist Church. It's now the Alberta Alley. We own that as well. It's been functioning for a few years as a kind of community arts hub, providing affordable art space and performance space for a variety of tenants. Our intent is to move our small offices into it, but breathe more life into it so that it better fulfills its mission of providing affordable art space. Our request there is simply that the zoning be made a community facility. It's a historic church that was built in the 40s. We're going to apply for historic tax credits and fix it up under that rubric and keep the historic nature of the facility, but hopefully continue to use it and breathe more life into it as a community space. We anticipate using it as a location for resident services for the residents of our community, providing college-age arts instruction as well as performance space for the community at large.
Great. Thank you, all 3 of you. Appreciate it.
The next 3 are Larissa Zimmerman, Mel Halfsauce, and Christopher Rosing. And they'll be followed by Miles Sisk, Barry Smith, and Silas Beebe.
Good afternoon. Would you like to start?
Hello. I don't know. I'm nervous.
Don't be.
Good afternoon. My name is Larissa Zimmerman, and I'm here to oppose map change number 1799, Fremont, Mississippi, zone changing from CM2 to CM3. I'm not here representing anybody but myself, but I am a poor resident of Portland, Oregon, with family roots going back multiple generations on both sides here in the state of Oregon. I've worked low-paying service jobs my entire life, and So when I was able to finally purchase my own house about 15 years ago, when they were throwing loans at people that probably shouldn't have been able to get them, I was not surprised that I was able to buy in the Albina neighborhood, Boyce technically, but Mississippi. That area has been traditionally low-income housing simply because of the historical institutions of racism that date back to the redlining that occurred after the Vanport flood and exodus. And I would just ask that you all please keep in mind that visionary plans about the future of Portland have often been experienced by this neighborhood of North and Northeast Portland as acts of violence. The I-5 development in the early 60s, Memorial Coliseum, the expansion of Emmanuel Hospital, basically one piece at a time destroyed what was a thriving African-American commercial neighborhood. There was also urban renewal in the 1960s, removing houses that were deemed blighted, neglect by law enforcement and investors, so that Black-owned residents were unable to actually invest in their own properties. So I moved into this neighborhood and discovered that what I now understand is I was part of the first wave of white gentrification. Black families are leaving and are now busing their children in to attend the Boyce Elliott Grade School from out in the numbers. So what is being done to keep diversity, to keep this neighborhood a place where people like myself or people who have been there longer than I have, who can't compete economically with the development that is actually happening all around us. And just to bring it back to the particular parcels of land, they currently contain a low-income housing complex, which, as John Ross pointed out, are good neighbors, and a single-family home that is a rental property. And that woman who lives in that house has already been given her eviction notice. They're planning on selling the property. The low-income housing is going to go away. I would love to see more low-income housing in my neighborhood, and I really would prefer not to have a 7-story high-rise condo at the end of my block. There's going to be one across the street. They're in the process of building it. But in that transition phase, it would be nice if it just stepped down a little before you got to the 1-story houses like the one I live in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a couple questions. So this is currently R25. It was previously recommended for CM2, and now we're moving to CM3. Did I get that right?
That's my understanding, but
Yes.
I'm not good at this planning talk.
So the current owner of that affordable housing development is PCRI? But you said that the affordable housing was going to go away. Are you saying that's their intent to sell
My
it?
understanding is they intend to sell the property and put in, at this point, I believe it's 4 stories. And then the CM3 would allow them to take it as high as 7 if they
All right,
meet
that was my
certain
confusion because earlier testimony stated that PCRI doesn't intend to build to the full height allowance of CM3, so I was just wondering who was lobbying for CM3 versus CM2, but I guess we'll find out from the Planning Bureau.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Mel Hafsis. My partner and I own a property over in Southeast Portland, 1135 Southeast 80th Avenue in Montevilla, Mount Tabor. And what we have is a business residential, zoned residential right now. It's a grocery store, small neighborhood grocery store that has been in existence since the early 1920s. It has been operating as a grocery store from that time to even today. And what we have is something of an incredible part of our neighborhood that we have recently realized. Some of the words that have been thrown around are relic, Mayberry, fictional community, and even the statement, inevitable forces that are at work. As you see, we have been there for 22 years plus. I am no longer 45 years old. I am no longer completely healthy. And the word gentrification had no meaning to me until it was perhaps on my doorstep. And I realized that, well, perhaps what would be the best thing, not for necessarily us, but for our neighborhood, because we not only work in our neighborhood, but a block away we have a home. What would be best for our neighborhood? And we have asked that, and we have perhaps come to the realization that maybe it is time for us to move into another direction, but what we have is such a gift to the neighborhood that maybe we need to make it something that somebody really wants to hold on to. And I think what that would be is maybe not Mayberry, but perhaps something with a little different classification that would allow a person to carry it to the next step. And we feel that we have been given a gift and being able to stay there for 24 years, but perhaps it is time. But I think with a different zoning and an opportunity to perhaps take it to the next level is something that we need to give thought to, and I would appreciate consideration. And in our 22 years, I just want to say thank you, City of Portland, for allowing us to experience what we've experienced, and the Planning Commission and all the information and the help that they've been. I thank you all. It's been a delight.
Thank you for coming in. Commissioner Fritz?
Just to clarify, what's your zone now and what do you want it to be?
Pardon me?
What is your zoning now and what would you like it to be?
It is R5.
And what would you like it to be?
Well, it's my understanding, according to Marty, that it's RC, I believe, or commercial residential.
So whatever
we have that now. We have a house on the property along with a separate store facility.
So you're happy with whatever the Planning Commission said it should be, is that correct?
Well, unsure, but I think what needs to happen is some kind of a definite something so that we know what we can do and what we can't do.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Rosing. I would like to express my objection to the rezoning of 9131 North Lombard to commercial mixed use. This is change number 1848. I own and live in the 110-year-old bungalow across the street at 9130 North Lombard, and I have for 10 years. The city and Portland Bureau of Transportation Actions have already nearly turned the entire block into a commercial enterprise. My neighbor to the left is already zoned commercial mixed use and has had part of his property confiscated to expand a turn so the semis coming from Rivergate could pass through easier. This reduced his 2 lots into 1, and as he cannot sell his individual lots anymore under city ordinance because they are now too small, he can only sell it to developers at any current market price. Right now, he offers affordable rental housing, but not for long. My neighbor to the right is an apartment complex full of renters who are unlikely to complain to City Hall about zoning differences. Now the city proposes to rezone the house across the street, which also has as its neighbor an apartment complex, which for 10 years I've seen no one except ethnic minorities and single mothers live in. And between that and the rent law proposals, it seems the city proposes to make it safer for single homeowners to Airbnb rather than rent rooms while simultaneously sacrificing affordable Section 8 and affordable housing to developers one building at a time, reflecting of what she said earlier. So this looks like a back room zoning done from behind a desk with little input and insufficient thought given to the residents of the area. I propose the city rejects the rezoning of 9131 North Lombard, or at least rezones my property, so that I can sell it after you've turned my entire block into the property of corporations and I'm surrounded by antiseptic concrete and glass commercial ventures with an incessant stream of semi-trucks going by because no one will want to live there. Additional note, since I have time, according to the mixed-use urban center designation of the comprehensive plan, the proposed zoning change for number 1848, development will be pedestrian-oriented with a strong emphasis on design and street-level activity. However, thanks to the actions of PBOT, which I believe was over the objections of the St. John's Neighborhood Association, this particular corner is a major thoroughfare for commercial truck traffic from Rivergate, averaging now several hundred semis an hour during business hours. It's one of the least safe intersections in the city for pedestrians. So the definition of the zoning proposal and the actions of PBOT seem to be in direct contradiction to one another, which is further evidence of the lack of foresight and study in this proposal. The main point is the block is a mess. This zoning doesn't make any sense, and I'd like the council to consider it.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, all three of you. Carla, by my count, we're down to the last 10. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Next three are Miles Sisk, Barry Smith, and Silas Beebe. And they'll be followed by Eric Ovala, Stu Smucker, and Sam Noble.
Good afternoon. Would you like to kick us off, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
So my name is Miles, and I'm speaking on 1717 and 1800, the changes around the Hollywood region, and I am in support of keeping those at RH 4.1. For disclosure, I also manage Felicia Williams' campaign for Council Seat 3, just so that's aware, although I'm not going to be speaking on anything related to that today. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about density in that region. As it was mentioned before by a previous testimony, Hollywood is a major transit section in the city, and this is quite frankly exactly the type of place in the city where we should be building higher density housing. But more specifically, I wanted to speak on my concerns about the constant defense of single-family housing in the city. Now, here's my major concern. You on Portland City Council, you're making decisions now that we're going to be living with here in Portland for maybe the next 40, 50, 60 years. And you know, that's why I come here, is there's a very good chance that I'll be here in 40, 50, 60 years from now. And one of the major concerns I see with single-family housing in Portland in general is I view it as being dynasty housing. We're not going to stop seeing growth in Portland. People are not going to stop moving here. It's not just economic factors, it's not just Portlandia, it's not big evil developers, it's climate change. People are being driven to the region. California is a tinderbox. We're not in a bubble, it's not gonna pop. Things are only gonna keep getting more and more expensive, and I have to ask myself, in 40 years, all these single-family housing units that we're fighting to defend, what are they going to look like? Who is going to live in them? Right now, I only seeing it being one of two types. People that come from out of the city that can afford million-dollar bungalows in North Portland in 20 or 30 years, since the demand's just gonna keep driving things up if we don't meet it with supply, or the families of the people who currently own this housing. There's not room for anybody new, there's not room for anybody young. So I just wanted to express my concern in general with that concept, especially in areas like Hollywood, which are major transit section or major transit oriented places where we should have higher density housing. That's really all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, my name is Barry Smith. I'm an architect here in Portland, and I work with a lot of home builders, small developers, and property owners in this space outside Central City and outside some of the plan districts. We've been auditing the 2035 plan and the subsequent changes to the mixed-use zone and the residential zone. And what we've been finding is that when we start adding the modeling that is helping protect neighborhoods from these higher density areas of development, we're not able to capture all of the floor area ratio that's available. We're barely getting to the base zone floor area ratio, and in the mixed use areas, the bonuses all come from inclusionary housing. I submitted testimony to the Planning Commission to look at some areas of the cities where we might use some of the tools in the 2035 plans and overlay zones, like urban corridors and urban centers, like Hollywood, Gleason between 60th and the Gateway District, Stark. I submitted one for 82nd from Woodstock to the southern boundary of the city. And I think we need to revisit the entire Southwest Community Plan again. I think it's really hurt a lot of efforts on that side of town. This is probably, my request is a City Planner Full Employment Act. I support the refinement that's going through, but I think we're going to need to continue to revisit our neighborhoods and start adding tools so we can get things like greater building heights, where it's appropriate to capture that space that we can deliver as affordable. We, by the way, are one of the first 3 projects. We have a project on 54th and Woodstock, which was one of the first 3 projects in the first round of inclusionary housing approvals. And my clients went through quite a gambit, and the poor folks at the Housing Bureau went through quite an ordeal trying to figure out what to do. And I think it might be good for the council to reach out to some of the people that have gotten inclusionary housing approved and are under construction to ask them how to make the process go faster, smoother. A lot of people are trying to avoid doing this. I think it's the future, particularly when it's tied to bonus densities, where it may not be tied anywhere else, and we ought to figure out a way to capture it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Howdy. I'm Silas Beebe. I'm here to testify about property number 1728, which is 2425 Northwest St. Helens Road. I'm a fifth generation Portlander. Spent most of my 44 years here in this neighborhood and seen it gone through extensive redevelopment. My family's worked hard to maintain the livability of our beloved neighborhood, city, and region. Myself and dozens of my neighbors who have also testified urge you to retain the buffer designation for the lot, or at least provide some sort of amendment, additional overlay protection, or conservation easement or something to maintain the protection it offers the many adjacent homes. The site serves as the sole and minimal buffer between homes with many families and children and the air and noise pollution of heavy industry and the highway that are already so close. Removing the buffer overlay allows most kinds of industrial work outside and inside, manufacturing, rail yards, diesel repair, warehousing, chemical treatments, etc., and reduces setbacks down to 0 feet from the back of a residential lot and 5 feet from the side of a lot. And there's a lot of homes right there that would be directly affected if they had manufacturing or industry 0 feet from the back of their lot with families. The specific site and the neighborhood in general have a long history of landslides, and some homes nearby are already condemned because of slides up there on Thurman. There are 3 small streams running through the site that increase the likelihood of slides and make development more difficult. The city's own Northwest Hills Natural Areas Protection Plan cites the environmental and energy benefits of maintaining the natural habitat on this site, and notes the sighting of many bird and mammal species, and neighbors like myself can attest to frequent sightings of animals in this forested strip. See deer, coyotes, skunk, raccoons, pileated woodpeckers, flickers, bald eagles, owls, many more. And the Northwest Hills Natural Areas Protection Plan, I could read a couple of excerpts from that. The environmental consequences section says resource protection of this area would result in positive consequences. These consequences include protection of site as groundwater recharge area, protection of habitat for native wildlife and habitat interspersion with the Balch Creek ecosystem, protection of forest and watershed resource values, including clean water, air pollution, and microclimate amelioration. It's also resource protection result in positive consequences for energy, reduction in industrial and residential energy consumption for heating and cooling systems, transportation, or infrastructure use would result in energy savings. And those were direct quotes from the city's own Natural Areas Protection Plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all 3 of you. Next 3, please.
Are Ross Cornelius, Doug Capps, and Eric Ovala. And they'll be followed by Stu Smucker, Sam Noble, and Tad Everhart.
Greetings. Welcome.
Thank you. So, Mayor and members of the council, I'm Doug Capps, member at Trinity Episcopal Cathedral, member of a parking study committee, which started this whole process for us that brought us to where we are now. With me is Ross Cornelius. John Spencer is in the audience, available to answer any questions. We're here on number 1821 of the map revision project, and a study or a report. Trinity is located at Northwest 19th between Davis and Everett. It's the main cathedral is. And it has a half-block surface parking lot on Northwest 19th on the east side of 19th. that particular parcel is zoned high-density residential today. We need increased parking capacity to accommodate Trinity's growth. So the commercial zoning that would occur in this process will help make it possible to provide and expand services to our membership, to the neighborhood around us, and to the community at large. We're contemplating a mixed-use commercial development with structured parking. I want to mention that we've been in communication with NWDA, the Planning Committee of the Northwest District Association, on this proposed change. We're committed to a collaborative process with the neighborhood to assure that whatever our development plans turn out to be, they will meet the needs of the community. And I also want to mention that we support another request that you heard about earlier of an adjacent property owner, Doherty Dental. Their property is adjacent to this parking lot. They have parking. We share the parking today, back and forth, them to ours during the week, ours to them on the weekend and evenings. And we support that in the event that it will help facilitate a possible joint development with the dental office, since we are contemplating medical offices in the mixed-use project that we're looking at. And with that, I was going to turn it over to Ross just to add a couple of things too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Commissioners. I'm Ross Cornelius, a member of Trinity for over 30 years now. Been working with Doug and a number of the parishioners to try to figure out our parking challenges and how we do that on the currently zoned RH lot across the street. It's been difficult to figure out how to add parking and get the housing built at the same time. I've spent my whole career just about in housing development, affordable housing development, and I'm very keen to that issue. The benefit of the zone change that we're proposing on the half block across the street is that we're currently parked on two other lots that Trinity owns to the east, or to the west and to the south, that are quarter blocks that are also zoned RH. And those are jammed parking on Sunday mornings. The whole neighborhood down there is very full of parking. And being able to put the parking that we're accommodating on all these different surface lots over into one spot frees up those other lots for future development. And so we're sort of on a phased approach here. We got to solve our parking needs first, but it does allow the opportunity to contemplate further development on Trinity's other sites, which we're very excited about. And Commissioner Fish had mentioned the synergy between the churches and religious institutions in the city and the potential of development. We've heard a lot from our parishioners, particularly elderly parishioners, the need to want and desire to live close. Trinity is a kind of a cultural center as well as a religious institution, and many people who have been there for a long time want to live closer and participate in the rich arts and music and and food programs that we have. So this would allow us to, our first step towards, hopefully, as a second step, providing housing for them, as well as potentially for some of the employees of Trinity.
So I'm unclear. It's presently zoned RH, and you're asking it to be rezoned to what?
To CM3, on the half block across from the cathedral.
Great. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Erik Oyala, and you heard from Dean and Gina Vanderbush earlier today. I'm here to support them in their request for zoning change for this block in West Portland Park subdivision. It's in the Crestwood neighborhood, I believe. And my mother owns a lot nearby or on the same block, and there are a total of 7 properties there. 5 of them have been built on. These 2 lots are vacant currently. But with the current zoning being R10, Dean Vanderbush was requesting that it be changed to R7. this would allow these two properties to be built on. This would benefit infill housing. These properties are close to I-5, so they're lower cost, so it's going to be, very conducive for first-time home buyers. And originally, this property that my mother owns was buildable. Back in the early 1980s, my father purchased it. He was intending to build a house on it. And he actually did get go in for a permit, though because of the recession that came about, he did not pull that permit. And then late 80s, my father passed away, and my mother's been trying to sell that property ever since then without success. We have an offer on it currently, and but it will not sell unless it's developable. And under the rules that evidently were brought about in the early 1990s, that is not possible because of those rule changes. And so we're requesting that this zoning be changed to R7. And as I said, none of these properties meet the R10 square footages that this is zoned currently. And the properties range from, I think the smallest being 5,000 square feet. My mother is 92 years old. She doesn't speak English very well, so I'm testifying on her behalf as well. It would greatly benefit her. She's been paying taxes on these, for all these years, and it's been a financial drain, quite frankly, for her. It would benefit her too. She does not have a huge income. She's on a fixed income, and so this would greatly benefit her.
So could you give me the address of the property again, please?
The address?
Yes.
10810 Southwest 55th.
And is this north or south of the freeway?
It's west of the freeway in that location, or I guess it's northwest of the freeway.
And it's in the Crestwood neighborhood?
Yes.
And have you been to talk to them? Have you talked to the neighborhood association?
I have not. This came about quite recently, actually. We understood that, so there's not a change request currently listed for this.
And it sounds like this is an area, it's not just a single lot like we heard about previously. There's several lots that are all in the same problem.
Well, there's a total of 7 lots on this block.
Okay.
And ours is, my mother's is one, and Dean Vanderbush's is the other one.
And are those the only two that are affected by this?
Yeah, they're the only ones that could be developed now as
Okay.
infill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Next three.
Are Stu Smucker, Sam Noble, and Tad Everhart. And the last person who will follow them is Christine Martin.
Good afternoon. Would you like to go ahead and start, sir?
My name is Stu Smucker. As set forth in the recommended draft to the map refinement project, the property located at 2425 Northwest St. Helens Road received more public testimony than any other property affected by the map refinement project. In October last year, 27 people weighed in regarding removal of the buffer from that property. The testimony was unanimous. All 27 people opposed removal of the buffer. Not a single person, not even the owner of the property, weighed in supporting removal of the buffer. There are 3 reasons given on page 21 of the recommended draft of the map refinement project for removing the buffer. None of the reasons pertain to specific properties. The overarching rationale appears to be that the buffer needs to be removed for citywide consistency. This property has unique characteristics. First, it has 3 streams on it. Second, It has an unusually steep slope and sandy soil as set forth in expert testimony submitted to the city in 1991. I do not believe that the expert opinions offered 20-plus years ago and the unanimous voices of 27 landowners and residents offered 5 months ago should be disregarded. Some of the people who oppose removal of the buffer have lived in this neighborhood for decades. In light of the unanimous opposition to the city's proposal, I submit that the buffer should remain on the St. Helens property.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Sam Noble. I live in the Mount Tabor neighborhood, right at about 62nd and Stark, and I'm here to talk about two properties under consideration in this proposal. The first is at 511 Southeast 60th, which is at the intersection of Southeast 60th and Stark. It's to the west of my house. It's downhill. I understand that the Housing Bureau owns it, so in many ways, I recognize what I'm about to say is mostly for the commissioner in charge of the Housing Bureau, which I believe is you, Mr. Mayor, because I fully support the zone change that the Planning Bureau proposes. I think that the city needs a lot more subsidized housing, and this is a really good place for it. It's entirely possible that building a 3-story building on this site could affect my view. I'm not really concerned about that. What I am concerned about, though, is that in the interior of the Mount Tabor neighborhood, there are very, very, very few, call them kind of four corners kind of thing you see through the city. There are very few areas where you have kind of a confluence of little commercial pockets where you could ever have anything that grows into useful commercial services for a neighborhood. And right now, this site, I believe, is used as a daycare by the YMCA. And I think that's great. Those services are very hard to come by. The thing that I'm asking for here is for council or for you, Mr. Mayor, to encourage in the strongest possible way that the Housing Bureau maintain some kind of service to the neighborhood on the ground floor. Something that keeps the street front active would be fantastic. The current daycare service is great. And then as much housing as you can get above it. But what's important to me is that this little commercial area that is 2 blocks from my house not wither and die because right now housing is more valuable than commercial services, or just because of the way the mission of the Housing Bureau encourages one particular outcome. So the second site I want to talk about is a few blocks from my old house in the Buckman neighborhood. It's 2438 Southeast Main Street. I think you've heard a little bit of other testimony about this site before. I lived in the Buckman neighborhood for 9 years. I walked up that street by accident several times. This particular site ends in a cul-de-sac, and so it's always a frustrating, memorable experience to be up there because you have to kind of turn around and go back. It's a grossly underdeveloped site with a really weird configuration that doesn't make any sense on a map that says this is a single family area. So I encourage you to accept the Planning Bureau's proposal or go a little bit further and observe that since the site is mostly empty, that it might be appropriate to even zone the whole lot R1. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. My name's Tad Everhart. I'm here with Peggy Curl. We both live on Southeast 59th Court, and I'm speaking in regards to map change 1662, as Mr. Noble did. We wanted to point out that we own the properties west of your property. We're at the bottom of a steep slope that's approximately 2 stories tall. We welcome redevelopment. We think that the school probably is not safe, especially for children, so we're looking forward to redevelopment, and we especially welcome affordable housing. It's a great site with schools and good transit, so it's going to be an asset. We're also appreciative of the fact that the city is the developer with nonprofits. We hope for much better development than we'd see with a for-profit developer, quite frankly. We're 10 neighbors. We're a pretty close neighborhood around a 1-block cul-de-sac street. And we're not here in opposition, but we are here with concern. And we've met with the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association a couple of times. They're writing a letter in support, sharing the same concern. And the concerns are twofold. First of all, it is a very steep hillside, and so we're roughly 2 stories below your site. If you build a very tall building with a big mass, we get even less light. It wouldn't be so bad, but to the south of us, we have the same situation, a 2-story steep slope with a 3-story apartment building. So Portland, we're dark and cloudy most of the year. Light is a precious commodity. We hope that you don't shut off too much of it. And we respect that you have a balancing act here, but please keep us in mind. The other concern that we have, quite frankly, is the intersection. And this is probably one of the intersections that you struggle with because it's a confluence of history where 2 streets were apparently developed at different times, so they're not aligned. Southeast 59th Court jogs where intersections start, but it's also at the top of the hill. The result is people racing down the hill or racing up the hill so they don't have to stop. So high speeds, misalign, no turn lanes at all. People get out in the middle of the intersection and their life is in their hands, quite frankly. So I don't know if this is an opportunity to use some of your land to try to fix that intersection, but I think it's only a matter of time before we have a fatal accident if we haven't already had one there. So our concerns are twofold. Don't make the intersection worse with development that's perhaps too much for the site, but also consider the possibility of using part of your site to realign the streets. Thank you.
Very good. And you said there's a letter forthcoming, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm
not sure if I've received
I have a letter
it yet.
from our neighborhood of 10 houses, but we met with Stephanie Stewart. The Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association voted unanimously with 1 abstention to write a letter of concern sharing our concerns.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, all 3 of you. Last, I think, 1, is that correct?
Right. Christine Martin.
Last but not least, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, Mayor and Commissioners, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. My name is Christy Martin, and I own a house at 3435 Northwest Vaughan. And some of my neighbors in Willamette Heights have already done a great job talking to you about our concerns. I'm here today to voice my concern that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is proposing to remove all buffer zones. This includes a lot at 2425 Northwest St. Helens Road, a buffer that separates the industrial zone from the residential zone of Willamette Heights. Please carefully review the history and the features of this property. Because of the 3 creeks and the steep slope, which can be 25 degrees in some spots, this is a geologically unsustainable hillside that has a long history of landslides. It is vital to allow the vegetation on the property to grow to prevent erosion. This area should remain a conservation overlay. Please make an exception and retain our buffer designation. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. So could we ask our staff to come up? That concludes the formal hearing, and I'll give the formal language in a minute, but I didn't know if there were burning questions that people wanted to have answered today while we have the staff here.
Mayor, I have a procedural question.
Commissioner Fish.
So I have a staff person who, along with me, has been keeping a running list of we've had people come up and give us particular tax lots or addresses and been very thoughtful about their issue. And some, for me, I need more information than for others, just in terms of follow-up. What's the next step? You've been making the list too. So what do we get next from you that helps us sort this out?
Okay. So you do have 2 staff reports before you, or staff memos. So one dated March 8th and one dated March 13th. So there's some more information in those staff reports. At some point when there's the close of the public record, I do want to have a consolidated list of all the public testimony that we've received before council. So that's in the works. And so that would be a forthcoming staff memo. As far as specific information regarding tax lots or sites, I think it's going to have to be a conversation that we have between your office and how I can kind of assist, because there are a lot of sites that we're tracking right now. So I just would need to know some specifics, and I may not necessarily cover it in a forthcoming staff memo. So I need to know what sites you're curious about.
But we could, in a follow-up meeting, just go through our list.
That'd be great.
I will tell you though, because we've been doing all this comprehensive plan stuff in Central City 2035, we find it incredibly helpful to have a recommendation from you as to, in two respects. One is this a major or minor thing? Because sometimes some of these strike me as being very technical in nature, or correct a problem, or correct an inequity. Some of them seem to have a broader policy question. Some actually, had some pushback. So where there's some disagreement in the community. So that, sort of taking out the ones that are more of technical and, yeah, this is a legacy issue or historical issue, and we think it's fine. That's helpful. And then flagging the ones that you think are the bigger policy questions. And I put an amendment in on Albertina Kerr, so presumably that's a policy question. And, there's a couple of questions we'll have to ask about that. But I would just say we welcome a little guidance from you. And if there's some things that you want to, I won't say take off the table, but essentially say that in a normal proceeding, we consider these consent items, as you have done in other proceedings, Eric. That's helpful to me, because if you don't think they're a big deal, then that's helpful. If it is a contested or is out of sequence or raises a policy question, then we're going to ask you to help us understand the underlying question.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
So it sounds like we can do a wrap-up memo that has a consolidated list of everything in play, and we can try and sort it the way you just described.
Yeah, and the ones that you honestly think are no big deal, we reserve the right to disagree with you, but when you do that, it's always helpful for us to sort of figure out what's just a technical fix versus what has a bigger implication.
What we did before the Planning Sustainability Commission is we did have that kind of technical wrap-up memo. And then working with the commission, we had, you'll probably recognize the format, but we had our big amendments chart that we started working through. But I think we do have right now the April 4th meeting on the schedule for further deliberation. I don't know at this time how much time we have for that meeting, but I definitely would want to work with you and prioritize what we're going to be talking about at that meeting.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're going to have to do the round robin with the offices, because I'm sure we'll each individually have lots of questions given the testimony we've had today.
Right.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Is it incumbent upon us at this point to bring forward issues we've heard that we resonate with? Do we need to bring those forward?
Yeah, so
let me give the formal language just so we have that on the record. So we have concluded, obviously, our hearing today on the 2035 the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the map refinement project. The oral record is now officially closed. The written record is going to remain open until Friday, March 16th at 5 p.m. I will ask my fellow commissioners to propose any amendments that they may have by March 30th. We'll come back on Wednesday, April 4th to deliberate and to vote on amendments. So that concludes the formal business portion and puts on the record the dates.
We have a time on April 4th.
It'll now be 2:15.
Oh, it's a time certain.
Yeah.
Okay.
2:15, time certain on April 4th, and this will all be noticed.
And Carla, do we have a duration of time? Do we have an hour or 90 minutes?
Depends how long council wants to go that afternoon.
We love this stuff.
Is that the only thing on it?
There's nothing else, no. That's the.
So Meg, could I make a slight suggestion, amendment of what you just said? You said that the written record closes Friday, March 16th at 5 p.m. I hope that the staff is not going to start work on it at 5:05 and work all weekend on it. Would it make any difference to you if we make it Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning? Because lots of people might want to do it over the weekend rather than...
We have no preference.
Any objections?
I think that sounds great. It'll give the neighborhood associations an opportunity.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So Commissioner Fritz suggested, rather than closing the written record at 5 p.m. on March 16th, since we're not expecting the staff to necessarily work all weekend, let's just keep the record open until Monday. At what time, Commissioner?
I said 8, but because that's the opening of business. I think Joe Zender's nodding there, so that just doesn't...
So 8
that means that
a.m.?
the staff doesn't... the time for staff processing doesn't change. Just make sure... very clear we want you to take that weekend off.
Great.
Okay, so the written record is going to remain open then until Monday, March 19th at 8 a.m.
Can I ask one other question, Mayor?
Yes.
It's directed to Commissioner Fritz, because I was paying close attention to some of your questions, and I appreciated that you offered the guidance to a number of people to go to the neighborhood association and see whether this is a controversial proposal or not. But you also said in a couple of instances, you raised the question of whether this had come through the Planning Bureau or was coming directly to us. And I would benefit from just having a preliminary understanding of your view of the significance of that distinction.
Well, it's just how much vetting has it had by our citizen advisory body? Even with the staff's very well laid out list of amendments, it seems to me, without having had time to really look through it, it seems there were at least 2 or 3 new requests which you haven't heard before. So certainly I would want to get their opinion on that. And it's not that it has to go through the Planning Commission. Clearly, people can come in at the last minute, and they just did. It just, where there is a Planning Commission recommendation, I like to know what it was. If it hasn't been considered, then it's up to us to try to figure that out ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
And then on the same line, could I ask a follow-up question? Will you then notice any request that is new today? Because you had mentioned that you tell the nearby neighbors, will you do that for the new requests that came in?
Typically at this stage we wouldn't, because there's not another hearing scheduled, so there wouldn't be an opportunity for further debate.
Okay. I wonder if once you've done your memo, if you could send it to the neighborhood coalition so that at least they could have the opportunity to look through or something
Absolutely,
like that.
we can do that. And if you'll notice in the staff reports, the way that I organized the tables is I did it alphabetical by neighborhood association, just for ease of looking at it at a glance.
I did notice that. Thank you. It's very helpful.
One other thing I want to mention, just because it came up several times, is the topic of religious institutions and housing and how can we coordinate with that dynamic came up. And I just wanted to mention that BPS actually did seek and was awarded a grant from Metro using some construction excise tax dollars to work on a project that will help troubleshoot that issue and figure out if there's some ways we can facilitate that kind of work.
I wanted to mention also that my questions about have you been to the neighborhood association doesn't mean the neighborhood association has to agree. It's just Commissioner Fish will remember that this is a glimpse for our 2 new colleagues. We spent multiple days of 4-hour hearings going through. I mean, imagine doing this all through the city, every single lot, people coming in. We did that. And so to the extent, there's been things in the media that says, neighbors are opposed to all development, etc. What we actually found was a lot of the time neighbors came in and said, absolutely, this fits. And I would imagine that several of the requests that we heard today would get support from the community. As Commissioner Fish said, if everybody's fine with the proposal, then that's good information for me to perhaps not worry so much about it.
By the way, I still have vivid memories of those hearings, Amanda, because one of the things that stuck out was someone would be at that chair and they'd say, now I'm talking about the property on this corner with the fire hydrant in front, and Charlie would say, no, actually that fire hydrant's been moved to the southeast corner, and you'd come in and say, no, and actually you're thinking 2 blocks down, this is the street that has the dry cleaner on it, and at that point I would my head would explode, but
slight exaggeration,
the level of,
as is usual for our colleague to the left.
The level of detail that you brought was enormously helpful.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Last words? Very good.
Actually, one more thing. Sorry.
I wanted to thank everyone that came to testify today because it was a really pleasant session and very informative, and I just appreciate how thoughtful everyone was, and I didn't hear anyone really kind of advocating strictly for their own benefit. There was just a lot of recognition of community benefit and need for affordable housing, and it's just really appreciated. So thank you.
Glad you're starting to catch the planning bug. I think it would be helpful for all of us, certainly for me, is if you could give us a memo about the buffer zone. What are we losing? What are we getting? Is it really an even exchange or not?
Absolutely. And I've already flagged that as something that we'll probably want to talk about at our April 4th deliberation as well.
Yeah, if you could get that to us ahead of time, I certainly appreciate being able to read it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.